Purdue versus Oregon State. Zach, both of these teams did not look impressive last week. Now, Oregon State did stick with Oregon a little bit into halftime, right? It was, 14-21 or something like that at
Yes.
halftime. So there was a little bit of a closer score there. Purdue was nowhere to be found at halftime. It was like 35 to nothing, whatever that score was. I don't even remember. There were so many points. But at the end of the day, this is still a new game, a new slate. Purdue shuts out Indiana State week 1. They come back 2 weeks later. They give up 66 points to Notre Dame. They still have not gotten a single turnover this season on defense. They have not had any interceptions, no fumble recoveries, nothing like that. Zach, what are your thoughts going into this game?
I'm really curious to see how the Boilermakers respond. Because I appreciate how you contrasted. Like Oregon State got beat handily against maybe a top 5 team in the country when it's all said and done. Oregon looked like themselves, and Notre Dame is obviously they can be really good, but they just lost to a MAC team. Oregon State competed for a while. Purdue never competed, and I think there is a real question of how does Ryan Walters get this team ready after a butt kicking like that? And do they rally the troops or do they continue to wilt? And that's what I want to see is what does Purdue do to really get back and circle the wagons? And so my question is, can Hudson Card be that on-field leader that we thought he could be? I think he can still be a good player. More importantly, can the offensive line block? Can the defense, can they
I
do
hear it's
anything?
important for the offensive line to block, Zach. I'm no expert in
Yes.
football, but I hear that is a strategy that typically results in wins.
Yes, I that was my Gary Danielson moment of the week. If the more
Daniel.
if the team scores more, it will. Oh, good
The majority
analysis.
of the time, you will win if your team scores more.
It's my John Maddenisms. There we go. You need to see. Okay. But I think that my concern, and it's with that secondary, they could not tackle the ball carrier. And Oregon State, to their credit, can run the ball pretty well. Their quarterback can run, running backs are running well. And that's my biggest concern in this game is can the safeties actually wrap up if the running backs get to the second level? And can the defensive line get some penetration and kind of junk up that running game? Because if they can't, I don't think it's going to be nearly as bad as what it was, but it's going to be a long day for Purdue if they can't stop the run.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there. Dylan Thieneman, surprisingly, and actually the other safety, Antonio Stevens, they both had 4 missed tackles on the day. Which 4 missed tackles, you don't want to see that many for your team in a game. It can happen. It's certainly not the worst thing, but you would like to be better than that. But 4 missed tackles for each of your safeties in one game, yikes! That is not good, and that's not going to get it done. So Dylan Thieneman, the All-American for this year, he has got to be better, quite frankly.
Yep.
And I'm not trying to put the entire loss on Dylan Thieneman. Obviously, that was a blowout. That was a loss that many people contributed to. However, it's something that Dylan Thieneman, as the leader or one of the leaders of this defense, needs to really step up and say, look, we're not going to have that kind of performance again. For me, one of the biggest things on the offensive side of the ball for Purdue is they have to get themselves in good situations on third down. Purdue did not do a great job of converting third downs their last game, and one of the reasons why is because they were not in very many third and short situations. Like you said, the offensive line was not blocking very well. Hudson Card had a lot of pressure. He was throwing the ball away. He was getting sacked. They couldn't really run the ball hardly at all. And so when you're in a situation like that, then you're in 3rd and 9, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 11, and you're saying, Hudson Card, please pull a rabbit out of your hat here and get us a third down conversion, which, sometimes there are teams that just excel at that and do a very good job. I don't think Purdue is one of those teams. I don't think Purdue has the players on the outside that they've had before. And Ryan Walters is changing the way Purdue has played a little bit in the past. Purdue, I mean, under Jeff Brom, Purdue was offense, quarterback play, wide
Mhm.
receivers. You had a good running game, but Ryan Walters is coming in and he wants the offense to be a little bit more conservative. Not saying that
Yep.
he doesn't want to throw the ball. Obviously, he does, but he wants the offense to be a little bit more conservative and rely on that defense. And like we said, if your defense isn't tackling, there's only so much your offense can do, and we'll have to see if Oregon State takes advantage of that or if Purdue corrects the issues.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to think that Purdue isn't as bad as we thought, or as what was shown by Notre Dame. But I also don't think they're as good as what we saw against Indiana State. I think Indiana State's a bad team. I'm curious your score prediction here. For me, I think it's going to come down to the running games, and I don't think Purdue's going to be able to run the ball. And that's what makes me lean. I think Hudson Card will make a couple plays. Ultimately, I've got Oregon State in a lower scoring game, 24-13.
Interesting. I have Oregon State in this one 31-24. I do think Purdue is going to find their offense a little bit better in this
Okay.
game, but I think that Oregon State is just going to find their offense more. I think that Purdue is probably going to continue to struggle to stop the run. Unfortunately for them, I think that McCoy might have some success running around a little bit, not just passing the ball, but also running it. For me, Hudson Card, he has to distribute the ball around more than just to his tight end. Max Clare is a great tight end. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a very underrated tight end
Yep.
in Big Ten football. However, he cannot be your leading wide receiver on the team. You have to have players on the outside who are going to get open more and provide that provide that downfield threat for Hudson Card. So yeah, my prediction 31-24 Oregon State. I really wanted to pick Purdue. I was looking for every way possible to try and pick Purdue, but I think at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to the coaching situation for me. And if Ryan Walters can outcoach the Oregon State head coach, then I think that Purdue can win this one. But I mean, Ryan Walters had 2 weeks to prepare for Notre Dame,
Yeah.
and they came out looking like how they came out. So I, sue me, but I just don't trust Ryan Walters very much after that performance.
Well, if I can just push back a little bit, and I know I said last week that you have to evaluate the Ryan Walters situation. There are some coaches that historically just really struggle with how they use the bye week. I think back to even Jim Tressel, and I always hated when he had a bye week because he always came out flat that the next week. And that's I think the questions are valid. I am curious how Walters responds, and I think I see a pathway for Purdue to win. I think another layer of difficulty here is that it's in Corvallis and not in West Lafayette. And so,
Yeah, that's another big thing for me too. I forgot to mention.
yeah, and I think if this is home, I like the chances a little bit more for the Boilermakers, but you get your butts kicked, and then you have to travel halfway across, or not halfway across, all the way across the country to face a ticked off Oregon State team that can tell themselves, we were in it for the first 2.5 quarters against Oregon.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that bodes well for them in their situation. Let's get to a couple comments here. Dave says Notre Dame does Notre Dame things, losing to a team they're supposed to beat, and then kicking at taking. I think he said means names for the rest of the season or memes. I don't know. But yes, that is a very Notre Dame thing to do. I was just thinking
Yeah.
about that after the game. I was like, this is such a Notre Dame thing to lose to a MAC team and then go out and
Yeah.
destroy a Big Ten team.
Yeah, particularly a Marcus Freeman Notre Dame thing.
Right, right. Philip brings up a good point here, and I want to kind of gauge your thoughts on this before we move on, Zach. Ryan Walters wasn't ready to be a head coach when they hired him. He needed more time as an assistant. So I struggle with this because I do think Ryan Walters did a good job at Illinois. But last night I was listening to an SEC podcast and they were talking a lot about how they believe that you should never hire somebody to be a head coach in the SEC. And they said, like, they were actually giving the Big Ten some credit. They were saying, we actually kind of think the Big Ten should be doing the same thing. And they mentioned Ryan Walters and they said, why is this guy a head coach? The guy just got blown out by Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. Now, Marcus Freeman has a little bit of a better situation here because of who Notre Dame is. But they were saying the same thing. They were like, Notre Dame shouldn't have hired Marcus Freeman. That's how you have situations like this with Marshall and Northern Illinois. And so my question to you, Zach, is do you agree with that sentiment that the Big Ten should not be hiring first-time head coaches, not first-time coaches or like coordinators or anything like that, like their very first time? Like you need to be a head coach at a G5 school, you need to be a head coach at a Big 12 school or something like that. Because I tend to agree with them. I think if you are the Big Ten, you have as much money as you have. There is no reason. I'm not trying to dog Ryan Walters here. I'm just saying, like, if with the money and the prestige that the Big Ten has, there is no reason why you shouldn't be able to go to the Big 12 and the ACC and say, hey, you have a coach that's really good. We want to take him and bring him over to our squad. Even for a team like Purdue, they should be able to. Look what Indiana did. They just went out and got Kirk Cignetti from James Madison, one of the best G5 teams out there, and he's done great so far. And so you don't have a little bit of this slouch because he came in, he brought a lot of his guys in, and he's an experienced head coach. With Ryan Walters, you have a little bit of this slouch because he's learning on the job, and we have to understand that. But at the same time, is that Purdue's fault for hiring somebody who is a first-time head coach? You let him cut his teeth somewhere else and then come in. I'm curious your thoughts on it, Zach.
I think Dave Valensky has a good thought to this, and it's kind of my thought. I think I think it's probably more nuanced than that. And I in some ways I agree with you. I think it's always good to see a more extensive resume. That being said, we've seen a lot of coaches at Purdue, no less, Daryl Hazel being one of them, cut his teeth in the group of five, and he's like surefire, great head coach. And I think the reality is you need I think it's more about fit, program fit, than like what your resume is, which is I think that's part of the struggle with Fickle right now is at Wisconsin. Like he cut his teeth at Cincinnati, got him to a playoff bid, but he doesn't fit he is not building the program to fit the Wisconsin culture. And I'm not sure Ryan Walters, a defensive first head coach, really fits Purdue. Whereas Jeff Brom, basketball on grass type of stuff, that's kind of been their identity. I wonder, because there's just been a lot of group of five coaches that have gone up and then just stunk. And then contrast that, Kirby Smart, he was never a head coach, goes to Georgia, takes a few years to figure it out, wins 2 national championships. Ryan Day, never a head coach. He's been to the playoff multiple times. I think it really depends. And so I think with some guys and some programs, I think it's more about evaluating your pathway and your culture. And culture is overblown, but I think Ryan Walters has to figure out, how do I actually create an offensive identity that's similar to the effective Purdue programs of the past, rather than thinking, how do I make this the defensive identity that I want it to be. That's my thought.
A great point. I think it's a great point. I do get very annoyed when teams have an identity and things are going well, and then they just try to swap that identity. Now, I didn't think that was going to happen as much with Purdue because of the offensive coordinator. Oh, what's his name? That Ryan Walters brought in, Graham something. Anyway, I thought he was going to come in, and I mean, he was Hudson. He knew Hudson Card, and they were together. And I thought, okay, this offense can work. Like, yes, Ryan Walters is going to get that defense right, but I don't think the offense is going to fall off. Now, still yet to be seen, right? I mean, they did score what 45, 49 on Indiana State. Yeah. So I'm not trying to say the offense has dropped off or anything, but I do think Ryan Walters is coming in with a little bit of a different mindset than Jeff Brom has. And I'm not saying you have to hire the same exact guy,
right?
Because I don't think that's always the best case scenario. But I do think bringing in somebody who was offensive minded might have been a smoother transition than Jeff Brom. So yeah, I still think Ryan Walters can do it. I'm not trying to say Ryan Walters can't do it. I'm not trying to bash the guy. I just wonder the strategy overall of hiring a head coach in today's day and age, if it is more hire the G5, hire the Big 12, hire the ACC guy, rather than the coordinator from another Big Ten team. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'll just, one, it's Graham Harrell, the former Texas Tech record breaker, is the offensive coordinator. I think there's, going back to Jeff Brom real quick, there's also a reality. Like Jeff Brom was like maybe the best head coach at Purdue since Joe Tiller. Not maybe, he was. And so now, and he left like, you understand why he left. He went to his alma mater, but also he left he did not leave a good transition plan. And so there is a
I think it's
question.
because it was abrupt. Like he didn't
Yeah,
plan on leaving. It just the job became available, and he was like, "How do I pass this up?" Like,
yeah. And so this isn't dogging him, but there is a reality that when that happens, it may take more time. And so is this actually more of an indictment on Ryan Walters? Or is it actually a reality that like he was left a team that got blown out by LSU 63-7 in the bowl game after winning the Big Ten West? So that is I think that is a consideration too. And maybe we just shouldn't be shocked that it's taking this long to try to build something.
yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It does take a while to build something. So, like I said, I'm not trying to say Ryan Walters was the wrong hire or
Yeah.
that he's not a good coach or anything like that. I'm just saying I heard that they mentioned Ryan Walters, and I was like,
Yeah.
I think this is fits with what Philip is saying here.
Yeah.
And I think it's a
It
good conversation.
it warrants conversation. And I'm arguing I'm trying to give the other side, but I do have the same questions about Ryan Walters. So I
Yeah,
don't think what you're saying is like, "Oh, you're wrong." I think it's more like there's nuance to it, but
right.
there's
And I
questions.
think a lot of those questions will be answered if he pulls out a win here.
Yep. Agreed.
So, Sean Garner, have you picked the game between Nebraska and Illinois yet? No, that'll be our last game that we do tonight. So stick around for that one. I know everybody's excited about that one, so I want to make sure we don't miss it. Trying to make sure we don't have any comments. Brian is here. Brian says Walters had the Illini defense ranked number 1. It was worth taking a shot with him. You get Illinois ranked number 1 in anything, and you're worth taking a look at. I mean, Brett Bielema was there, and Brett Bielema has always had good defenses, but you're right. I mean, Illinois is not recruiting at that level, and they did have a favorable schedule that year. But you're right. I mean, he put Devin Witherspoon in the NFL, which I know Aaron Henry had a lot to do with that as well. It wasn't just Ryan Walters. But yeah, I mean, you have Illinois as the number 1 defense in the nation. That's really impressive. So again, not trying to say Ryan Walters is the wrong hire, but I do think the question is at least entertaining.